Our response team was flooded with messages. The coup has destroyed our youth's dreams and future. We want democracy and want our country to develop. #Save Myanmar.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, Russia, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I'm Molly Gambhir. Lots lined up. Let's get started. Over the past year, the South China Sea has found itself making headlines on multiple occasions. Tensions in the strategic waterway have spiked once again, all thanks to China. This time, Chinese vessels have been spotted at a reef that the Philippines calls its own. Not 1 or 10 or 100, but 200 ships are encroaching upon the disputed reef. Manila has sent out a stern warning. It wants the ships to back off. It says that the ships are manned by China's maritime militias. On Gravitas tonight, we take you to the tense waters of the South China Sea and tell you how Beijing could be creating a fresh flashpoint. We decode India's Act East policy and discuss what lies at stake for India in the South China Sea. I'm Molly Gambhir, also on the show for you tonight. India's role in the Afghanistan peace process as America faces mounting pressure over its looming deadline to pull out from Afghanistan. We look at how New Delhi could play a crucial role. The Turkish lira is in free fall once again. The president has sacked the central bank chief again. The country has now lost 3 central bank chiefs in 2 years. A year after witnessing raging bushfires, Australia is grappling with floods that could end up delaying its COVID-19 vaccine rollout. A volcano in Iceland has woken up after 6,000 long years. After initial concerns subsided, it is now attracting tourists. We get you a special report. But first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
The European Union has blacklisted Chinese officials over Beijing's crackdown on the Uyghur minority. The measures include travel bans and asset freezes on 4 Chinese individuals and 1 state-run entity. India has reported nearly 47,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 200 COVID-19 related deaths in the last 24 hours. This is the highest single-day spike of 2021. India has been consistently registering more than 40,000 COVID-19 cases for the past 4 days. Russian jets hit rebel training camps in northwestern Syria near the Turkish border, as Syrian artillery killed 7 civilians and injured 14 medics in an attack on a hospital in the area. Russian airstrikes reportedly came close to densely populated refugee camps along the border with Turkey. The European Union has placed Myanmar junta chief Min Aung Hlaing on an assets freeze and visa ban blacklist over the military coup and its brutal crackdown on demonstrators. Weeks after Meghan Markle's interview, the royal family says it is considering appointing a diversity officer. This is as the Buckingham Palace reviewed its current policies and acknowledged that more needs to be done. Hundreds of New Yorkers gathered in Chinatown to protest hate crimes against the Asian American community in the country. Similar rallies were organized in other parts. Thousands of Americans marched denouncing anti-Asian racism following the mass shooting last week in the state of Georgia. Russia's ambassador to the United States arrived in Moscow after being recalled for emergency consultations. The envoy was called back after U.S. President Joe Biden last week called Russian President Vladimir Putin a killer, to which Putin responded saying it takes one to know one. The exchange pushed diplomatic relations between the two countries to a new low. U.S. President Joe Biden has said he will visit the U.S.-Mexico border at some point and that he was aware of what was going on in the border facilities as his administration scrambles to manage a growing humanitarian crisis at its southern border. Lionel Messi celebrated a record-breaking 768th appearance for Barcelona with a brace as the Spanish giants thrashed Real Sociedad 6-1 in La Liga. The Argentina legend moved clear of former teammate Xavi's total as Barcelona closed the gap on leaders Atletico Madrid to 4 points. Antoine Griezmann opened the scoring, while American Sergio Dest scored twice and Ousmane Dembélé also found the net. Australian Matt Jones has ended a 7-year title drought on the PGA Tour by winning the Honda Classic in Palm Beach, Florida. The 40-year-old led by 3 going into the final round and extended his advantage to secure his first title since 2014. American Brandon Higgy was second on 7 under, while Jones's playing partner JB Holmes dropped from second to a tie for 46th after a 9-over 79. Jones shot a 2 under par final round of 68 to win by 5 shots.
Tensions are flaring up once again in the South China Sea. Hundreds of fishing vessels have been spotted at a disputed reef. The Philippines says these are Chinese vessels manned by militias. Manila has shot off a warning. It has termed the presence of Chinese vessels as an incursion. The Philippines has demanded withdrawal from China. So has Beijing opened up yet another front in the tense South China Sea? Is Beijing militarizing a disputed region? The South China Sea is one of the most hotly contested regions in the world. China stakes claim to 90% of the South China Sea. Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia and Brunei all have competing, sometimes overlapping claims. Any flare-up could lead to a serious military conflict. On Gravitas tonight, we will tell you about the trouble that's brewing in the South China Sea. Here's what's happening. The Philippines has spotted more than 200 Chinese vessels at a reef that it calls its own. They say the boats do not appear to be fishing and that they are manned by China's maritime militia. The Philippines says these vessels are violating its maritime rights. Here is where this is happening, the Whitsun Reef. It looks like a boomerang. The Philippines calls it the Julian Philippe. Manila says this reef lies within the country's exclusive economic zone. Manila has released some photographs of those ships. They are positioned side by side. The Philippines is concerned about the sheer number of these ships. They say these ships could engage in possible overfishing, destruction of the marine environment, as well as pose risks to safety of navigation. But a national task force in the Philippines says the Chinese vessels are not really fishing and the ships keep their lights on during nighttime. The Defense Secretary of the Philippines has shot off a statement. It says the presence of Chinese ships is a matter of grave concern. He called it a clear, provocative action of militarizing the area. What is Beijing's response? China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said today that the presence of these ships is very normal.
What I want to tell you is that Whitsun Reef is a part of the Spratly Islands, and China's fishing vessels have been fishing in the water of Whitsun Reef for a very long time. Recently, because of the maritime situation, China's fishing vessels have been staying near the reef to shelter themselves from strong winds. This is very normal, and we hope all parties can view this reasonably.
But for the Philippines, all this is far from normal. Back in 2016, the Philippines had won a case against China's territorial claims. 5 years ago, an international court had dismissed Beijing's claims to virtually all of the South China Sea, but China refused to recognize this decision. It continues to push its claims on the South China Sea. It is believed that Beijing uses fishing fleets across the region to assert its claims. This report is from 2019. It says a significant number of fishing vessels in the area forego fishing full-time to serve as the direct arm of the state through maritime militia. The bigger challenge is how China is transforming some of the islands. Reportedly, China has turned several reefs in the Spratly Islands chain into man-made islands where missiles, runways and weapon systems have been deployed. The Spratly Islands are a group of more than 100 small islands or reefs. They are surrounded by rich fishing grounds. China claims the entire Spratly Islands, while the rest of the parties have competing claims. So what exactly is China doing in the South China Sea? Well, besides carrying out incursions, sinking foreign ships, establishing new districts, giving Chinese names to islands, building new artificial islands, and using fishing vessels as maritime militias, nothing much. Our next report tells you about the strategic importance of the South China Sea and Beijing's never-ending nefarious activities in the region.
This is the South China Sea, a strategic waterway surrounded by 6 nations: China, Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia and Brunei. In April 2020, a Chinese surveillance ship hit and sank a Vietnamese fishing boat. The next month, China deployed an exploration vessel near Malaysia's exclusive economic zone. The frequency of harassment increased throughout 2020. Beijing strengthened its position amid the Wuhan virus pandemic. China established new administrative districts in the disputed waters with official Chinese names. At least 25 islands and reefs in the South China Sea have been named in Mandarin. The Global Times says the standardization of names reflects China's sovereignty over them. And to further strengthen these claims of sovereignty, China has established several artificial or man-made islands, like the Fiery Cross and the Subi Reef. where Chinese research stations are conducting field navigation and scientific surveys. Now, reports have emerged that Chinese maritime militias are operating in the area. So what are they? These militias are primarily fishing vessels. They are being used to augment the Chinese Navy's operations. The vessels possess sophisticated communication and GPS technology. They use swarm warfare tactics to enhance China's nefarious endeavors and assert Beijing's territorial claims. These militias have become a critical feature of China's expansionist strategy and could trigger a fresh flare-up in the tense South China Sea. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Today, the Indo-Pacific is a geopolitical term, a battleground for world powers. Take that out and you have a large confluence of the world seas, a region where two important oceans converge, the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Within this broad geographic region lies the biggest maritime flashpoint of our times, the South China Sea. Beijing thinks of it as its own backyard, but the world has a lot of stake here. So does India. Of late, New Delhi has shifted its foreign policy focus eastward, and it is understandable why. Nearly $200 billion worth of Indian trade passes through the South China Sea. Free and open navigation is in India's interest, but Chinese dominance would be disastrous. We have already seen indications of this. PLA warships regularly intimidate Japanese and Taiwanese vessels. Throughout history, maritime superpowers have dominated world politics. Think back to the British Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries and the United States since World War I. You control the seas, you control world politics. This is what China is trying to do in the larger Indo-Pacific, but its unilateral actions have had an unintended effect. It has brought all the regional stakeholders, including the Quad, together. India has been cultivating its ties in the region. New Delhi calls it the Act East policy. The major focus is on the ASEAN grouping. The ASEAN has 10 member countries, all from Southeast Asia. It is among the fastest growing political unions in the world. Thanks to their strategic location, ASEAN wields considerable power in the region. Now, India has not signed a free trade deal with ASEAN. It has also pulled out of the RCEP partnership, citing China's dubious designs. Instead, India has opted for mini trade deals. According to reports, a preferential trade arrangement with the Philippines is on the cards. A couple of reasons why this is significant. One, the Philippines is the third largest economy in ASEAN. Two, despite over 70 years of diplomatic ties, India and the Philippines have never been close. So this could be a chance for India to bring a new country into its fold. Indications are things are moving in this direction. Earlier this month, the two sides signed a major defense agreement. The Philippines will buy the Indian-made BrahMos PJ-10 missiles. It is the fastest cruise missile in the market. Defense cooperation is always an encouraging sign because they inevitably lead to strategic partnerships. India and the Philippines are also cooperating on the vaccine front. Manila plans to secure 8 million doses of Covaxin developed by India's Bharat Biotech. India could help the Philippines revive its struggling inoculation campaign. In December last year, India stepped up cooperation with another regional player, Vietnam. Navies from both sides participated in a 2-day military drill. An Indian warship was dispatched to Vietnam to deliver humanitarian aid. The naval drills were organized on its return voyage. Singapore's Prime Minister makes a valid point about the South China Sea. This is India's sphere of influence, always has been. Indians have sailed these waters for more than 1,500 years. There is evidence of historical Indian presence. And in contemporary times, India has a lot more in common with the region than China. Democracy, a colonial past, and territorial disputes with Beijing. Economically and politically, India has a lot at stake in the South China Sea. In fact, the entire world does. In the last 40 years, the Indo-Pacific prospered as a hub of free navigation. More than half the world trade passes through here. Deterring China's belligerence in the region is key, and India could be the bulwark against Beijing. New Delhi has the economic power, the political clout, and the military strength to tackle China on the high seas. The 21st century is often described as the Asian age. How India navigates the South China Sea will decide which Asian power dominates our times. Last week, the American Defense Secretary was in India. After wrapping up his trip, Lloyd Austin landed in Kabul on Sunday for a surprise visit. The clock is ticking for the United States in Afghanistan. America is supposed to withdraw its forces from the country on the 1st of May. But with the flare-up in violence, US President Joe Biden faces no easy choices. Here's a detailed report.
Over the weekend, Lloyd Austin, the new Defense Secretary of America, landed in Kabul, becoming the first member of the Biden cabinet to visit war-torn Afghanistan. This was a surprise trip, but the questions posed to Austin by journalists came as no surprise. They wanted to know if America will withdraw from Afghanistan.
Mr. Secretary, do you think the Taliban have met the conditions to ensure U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan?
What I will say is that it's obvious that the level of violence remains pretty high in the country. We'd really like to see that violence come down, and I think if it does come down, it can begin to set the conditions for, some really fruitful diplomatic work.
As per America's agreement with the Taliban, American forces should withdraw from Afghanistan on the 1st of May. That's the deal that the Trump administration had agreed to. Until now, Team Biden has kept its cards close to its chest. In Afghanistan, Austin said it is up to his boss, Joe Biden, to decide when the American troops will leave. The US president says a May 1st withdrawal will be tough.
That was not a very solidly negotiated deal that the former president, worked out. And so we're in consultation with our allies as well as the government, and that decision's going to be, it's in process now.
Likely to take longer?
I don't think a lot longer.
But May 1st is tough.
Could happen, but it is tough.
The Biden administration has tried to kickstart the withdrawal process again. Earlier this month, the United States had called for a meeting of all stakeholders in Turkey. At the same time, it is pushing for a wider UN-led dialogue. The United States wants India involved during a prospective meeting of foreign ministers from China, Russia, Pakistan, and India. Reportedly, Defense Secretary Austin discussed Afghanistan with the Indian leadership. On Monday, Afghanistan's Foreign Minister Mohammad Hanif Atmar arrived in New Delhi. It is a 3-day working visit, during which the Afghan Foreign Minister is expected to discuss the peace process with the Indian leadership. While the Biden administration might extend the deadline for withdrawal, it does look eager to withdraw. And going by all the signs, it looks like Washington wants New Delhi to be a part of the solution. Bureau Report, World is One.
Imran Khan has tested positive for the Wuhan virus. Some of you may already know this, but what you may not know is the kind of impact this will have on Islamabad's already struggling vaccination drive. For months now, Pakistan struggled to source vaccines for its citizens, and now when it finally has the vaccine doses, the Prime Minister of the country himself has tested positive, barely 2 days after getting a jab. There are concerns this could lead to greater vaccine hesitancy in the country. Our next report explores.
आपने सबसे पहले घबराना नहीं है.
When the Wuhan virus first emerged in Pakistan, Imran Khan reassured Pakistani citizens with this promise.
आपने सबसे पहले घबराना नहीं है. हम मुसलमान हैं, हमारा ये ईमान है कि जिंदगी मौत अल्लाह के हाथ में है.
A year on, all that's left of this reassurance is disappointment. The Pakistani Prime Minister has tested positive for the Wuhan virus. His wife Bushra Bibi has also tested positive. Both developed mild symptoms and are currently self-isolating. The Prime Minister of India has wished a speedy recovery to Imran Khan. But what's making headlines is the fact that Imran Khan got infected just 2 days after receiving his first vaccine shot. The jab was of the made in China Sinopharm vaccine, which in January this year was called one of the most unsafe vaccines with 73 side effects by a Chinese doctor. Nonetheless, Pakistan has received 2 batches of Sinopharm. The first shipment of 500,000 doses arrived in February. The second shipment of another 500,000 doses reached last week. Islamabad is also in talks with another Chinese company, CanSino Biologics, to vaccinate its population of 220 million. But the question is, how many in Pakistan would be willing to take the shot? Especially after knowing how ineffective Chinese vaccines could be. Asad Umar, the minister in charge of Pakistan's COVID-19 operations, says Imran Khan had been infected prior to his vaccination and that the symptoms take a few days before manifesting. These claims may be scientifically justified. But in a country where polio still remains an endemic due to widespread conspiracies against inoculation, it might get slightly tough to convince the people. Earlier this month, an Ipsos poll conducted on vaccine hesitancy in Pakistan showed that 2 in 5 Pakistanis are against taking the COVID-19 vaccine. 8 in 10 were completely oblivious of any vaccine names. 9 in 10 expected to be vaccinated free of cost. 43% expected to be vaccinated at home. And 23% were worried about the side effects. And then there are people like these who think the vaccine is a tool of warfare.
जो वैक्सीन हमें लगाई जा रही है, इसके अंदर बुनियादी तौर पर तो ये जानना ज़रूरी है कि इसमें शुअर और बंदर की डीएनएस हमारे जिस्म में दाखिल की जाएंगी और उसके अंदर नैनोबोट्स एक ऐसा मटेरियल है जो कि माइक्रोस्कोपिक होता है, जो माइक्रोस्कोपिक रोबोट्स कह सकते हैं उनको, वो हमारे जिस्म में दाखिल हो जाएगा और वो मूव करते हैं और वो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस देते हैं और हमारे जिस्म में जो कुछ भी है हमारे बॉडी में, हमारी सोच में, वो सारा ट्रांसफर होता है उनको.
The news of Imran Khan testing positive is only adding fuel to such wild theories. The Pakistani government is caught on a sticky wicket once again. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Turkey's currency, the lira, is in free fall once again. The reasons are all too familiar. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has sacked the central bank chief yet again. Turkey has now lost 3 central bank chiefs in just 2 years. Erdogan's move sent shock waves through the investor community. Reportedly, the lira plunged today by 15%. The drop was close to the all-time low. Nasi Akbal was fired on Friday. He was appointed last year in November, so he served less than 5 months in the position. No one really knows the exact reason behind his removal. He has been replaced by Sahep Kovacoglu, a former banker and a member of the ruling party. The Turkish markets responded with the pandemic. Reportedly, they lost nearly all of the gains made this year. Trading on the Istanbul Stock Exchange had to be suspended for some time after a sharp fall in share prices triggered automatic circuit breakers. A circuit breaker is an emergency measure to halt trading on a stock exchange to curb the panic among investors, especially when there is a sell-off. Citizens of Turkey criticized Erdogan's move.
the impression of being a country that does not follow any rules, that has no more norms, there is no more law, no more democracy, and all this has an impact.
What happened was surprising, but we are getting used to it in Turkey. The dollar falls and rises very quickly, but in the end, it is the citizens who suffer the consequences.
Of course, all this affects us. We can't even find a job anymore. And when we go out shopping, the prices are constantly changing. I really don't know what will happen to us.
Nasir Iqbal's appointment last year was part of a bigger shake-up when lira had dropped to a historic fall. Back in October 2020, lira had become the world's worst performing currency. Akbar had led the recovery of lira. He has been replaced by a member of Erdogan's party. Many believe this will hurt the autonomy of Turkey's central bank. The economy has now become Erdogan's Achilles heel. In November last year, Turkey's inflation rate had soared to more than 14%, a 15-month high. In February this year, Turkey shared that the annual inflation rate was well above 15%. What added to the troubles was Erdogan's foreign policy adventurism. The tensions in Eastern Mediterranean, the Turkish involvement in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Experts believe that Turkey's involvement in all of this put a heavy strain on the economy. Experts are now concerned that the latest sacking at the central bank will create more trouble for the Turkish economy. One of them said the long-term strength of the Turkish economy and the lira is now in jeopardy. One report claims that traders and analysts are now concerned. They feel that the change could rapidly erode the gains that Turkey had made. If the inflation remains high, it's only a matter of time before the common man starts complaining. Last year, this time, Australia was grappling with raging bushfires. The region was parched, craving rainfall. Exactly a year later, Australians got what they wished for and more. The country is dealing with its worst floods in decades. Our next report tells you more about how Australia went from one extreme weather event to another.
The year was 2020. Bushfires swept across the state of New South Wales in Australia, burning for days with no end in sight. Exactly a year later, the same Australian state is underwater.
Some communities who were battered by the bushfires are now being battered by the floods, and deep drought prior to that. And I don't know any time in our state's history when we've had these extreme weather conditions in such quick succession in the middle of a pandemic.
Submerged intersections, thousands stranded, and marooned livestock. Australia is dealing with a 1 in 100 year flooding. Life-threatening floods have washed away homes, with fresh rainfall inundating the coast.
This has been a very significant flood event for New South Wales. I've been a flood forecaster in the Bureau for 20 years, and this is probably the worst flooding that I've experienced and I've had to forecast.
The situation is unprecedented. Thousands have been asked to evacuate. Hundreds of schools remain shuttered. Over 8 million residents have been asked to stay home. And 38 regions in New South Wales are now disaster zones. Unrelenting rain has left many animals dead or stranded. Images from hard-hit areas showed the floodwaters consuming rows of houses.
It was going like when you live on the river, they'll go as fast as what the ski boats go and some of the race boats. I've never seen it. And as soon as it broke the banks, it was like a torrent.
Just over 12 months ago, the region was parched, witnessing a prolonged drought and raging bushfires, while Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that the country was being tested yet again. Scientists have warned Australia can expect more extreme weather events. A result of climate change, Australia is yet to begin its first major public phase of vaccination. The floods are now likely to delay the vaccine rollout. More and more weather warnings have been issued, but the situation is not likely to get any better, with heavy rain predicted for the next 3 days. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
This has been said over and over again. Vaccines are not silver bullets. They do not signal the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are still a long way from taming the virus. Vaccination drives have been hit by shortages and not to mention controversies. Meanwhile, people have started returning to their normal lives. The result? A record surge in Wuhan virus infections. We start with Europe. It is now battling a third wave. France reported 30,000 new cases on Sunday. 15 regions will go into a month-long partial lockdown, including Paris. Around 21 million French citizens will be affected by the new rules. The same story in Germany. The virus incidence rate is now 100 cases per 100,000 people. So statistically, for every 100,000 Germans, at least 100 are COVID-19 patients. So what is Berlin's plan? To extend the lockdown into April. This means more trouble for small businesses. Remember, lockdowns have become extremely unpopular in Germany. They cost Angela Merkel's party in the recent local elections as well. But the country has no choice. So if you thought lockdowns were a thing of 2020, it's time to think again. The only European country doing relatively well is the UK, almost a change of fortunes compared to this time last year. Britain is racing ahead of the EU in vaccinating its people, but it could soon be plagued by shortages. On Thursday, EU leaders are set to meet virtually. They are going to address the bloc's stumbling vaccine rollout. Every response is on the table, including blocking the export of jabs, something that UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is wary of.
Reassured by talking to EU partners over the last few months that they don't want to see blockades. I think that's very, very important. But clearly what matters to us in the UK is we get on with the rollout of the vaccine programme. I think we've now done over half the adults in the country, which is very, very good news. Most of Europe is under some kind of restrictions. So summer holidays are going to be a big no this year too, it seems. In South America, Brazil is defying the trends and not in a good way. On Friday, the country reported more than 90,000 cases. It was the second deadliest day of Brazil's COVID-19 outbreak. So why are things going from bad to worse? We are going to show you two videos now. These videos depict the problem in a nutshell. The first comes from Sao Paulo. Brazilian cops are breaking up illegal parties. Gatherings like this one are driving up the cases of the Wuhan virus in Brazil. Regional governors have started imposing tighter curbs. They are also deploying more officers to break up the parties. A look at the second video now. It's from the Brazilian capital. The president, Jair Bolsonaro, is celebrating his 66th birthday. Dozens of his supporters gathered outside his residence. No social distancing, no masks. Interestingly, no cops either to break up this gathering. In typical Bolsonaro style, the president attacked the lockdown measures. He said he is fighting for the people's freedom.
You can be sure of one thing, that my strength comes from within me and from you. If someone thinks that one day we will give up our freedoms, then they are mistaken. Some tyrants have taken away many of our freedoms. You can be sure that our army, and you also, you can count on our armed forces for democracy, for freedom. I would do anything for my people.
India is also at a crucial juncture. In the last 24 hours, almost 47,000 cases have been reported. It was the deadliest day since November last year. Here's the question. Is India on the brink of another wave of Wuhan virus infections? The data is worrying. There has been a 67% surge in the weekly caseload. The weekly death toll has jumped 41%. It's at a 9-week high. But there is one encouraging sign. The fatality rate remains low. Last year, when India was recording similar caseloads, the death rate was much higher.
What does this mean though? India has built up its health infrastructure over the last year, so fewer Indians are now dying from the virus. As many as 8 states are driving up India's numbers. They are Maharashtra, Punjab, Karnataka, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Haryana. The government seems focused on the vaccine campaign. It has so far resisted the temptation to reimpose lockdowns. There is a lesson to be learned from these 3 examples. Yes, the vaccines work, but they work in a collective. Unless herd immunity is achieved, social distancing must continue. Exactly a year back, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the Janata Curfew, a citizen-led lockdown. The current situation is fast resembling 2020. It is a new year, a new policy, but the same virus. So vigilance is the name of the game. A transgender woman has opened Pakistan's first Islamic school for the LGBTQ+ community in a country with close to 300,000 transgender people. Rani's madrasa offers a rare ray of hope as they are often subject to abuse and insult. Here's a special report.
On the outskirts of Islamabad, a group of transgender women make the way to what is believed to be Pakistan's first transgender-only madrasa or Islamic religious school. Inside, the head of the school, Rani Khan, gives daily Quran lessons to the roughly 25 students.
I used to dance and beg and attend functions, etc. I danced for 15 years and went around begging for 5 years. Then one night, I had a dream. In the dream, I saw that a transgender friend of mine who had died was in a state of great agony. That dream changed my entire life, and that is why I made this turnaround.
The madrasa is an important milestone for the LGBTQ community in the overwhelmingly Muslim country. In Pakistan, transgender people face widespread ostracism, even though there is no official restriction on them attending religious schools or praying at mosques.
I tell my transgender colleagues that they can also do what I have done. They can also come towards a good life. They can also designate a room for prayers and recitation where they can remember Allah and make atonement to gain a better life after death.
Rani was disowned by her own family at 13 and was forced into begging.
Most families do not accept transgender people. They throw them out of their homes. Transgender people turn to wrongdoing. They hold functions, they start dancing and begging and doing other evil things. At one time, I was one of them.
Pakistan's 2017 census recorded about 10,000 transgender people. Though trans rights groups say the number could be well over 300,000.
I'm bearing all the expenses from my own pockets. All the money that I earned when I used to dance and beg in the past, I'm using that money to run this madrasa. I'm using all my own savings. We have not received any financial support from the government so far.
Transgender people often remain on the margins of the Pakistani society, at times turning to prostitution and begging. The government in Islamabad has promised to help them earn a respectable living.
Our initiative of opening up of a madrasa for them is, I think, it's a huge step, and it is actually helping them get education as well and to come closer to the society in terms of religion.
Rani still ventures into the streets in an effort to find new students who are begging. Her hope is to be able to open other madrasas in the future or encourage other transgender women to do the same. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
What constitutes a fair warning? How about 40,000 tremors in 4 weeks? That is exactly the warning that Iceland got before a volcanic eruption on Friday. It was a small eruption by Iceland's standards. The volcano is not spewing lava anymore. More than a public safety hazard, it now appears to be a public spectacle.
Our next report gets you the complete story.
A 6,000-year-long slumber has been disturbed in Iceland. For 15 months, the signs have been clear. Increased seismic activity, and then last month, a dramatic step up. Almost 40,000 earthquakes in 4 weeks. The Reykjavik volcano was about to erupt. The only question was, when? On Friday, residents of the capital were settling down for the weekend. That's when the volcano fled to life. The glow could be seen from the city of Reykjavik, around 32 kilometers away. It was a relatively small eruption. Lava spilled over on two sides, covering an area the size of 200 football fields. Authorities said there was no immediate danger to people in nearby towns. Nonetheless, they were asked to stay indoors and keep the windows shut. At the airport, it was business as usual, no delays or cancellations. Iceland sits on a volcanic hotspot in the North Atlantic. It averages one eruption every 4 to 5 years. But this particular volcano has been dormant for a long time. For 6,000 years to be precise. The peninsula it sits on hasn't seen any eruption since the 12th century. But the sudden surge in tremors this month was a clear warning sign. By Saturday, volcanic activity subsided. Authorities opened the mountain to thrill seekers. Thousands arrived to catch a glimpse of the cooling lava. After all, it has been a 6,000-year-long wait.
I was especially surprised by the temperature. When we approached the lava that was flowing on the ground, we bet it was at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius more. And we all had super red foreheads.
Some onlookers thought there's heat, it's safe. Why not cook some sausages? This eruption appears benign as far as volcanoes go, but Iceland knows the raging mountains cannot be underestimated. In 2010, a single eruption sent up a mushroom cloud the size of Manhattan. More than 100,000 flights were cancelled and 10 million passengers stranded. But experts say this one will fizzle out soon. So the coast is clear for some lava tourism. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.